You're listening to Popcorn and Politics. What's the real deal? Hosted by Audrey Bell Kearney and Derek J. Wilson. Asking the hard-hitting questions you want answers to. From political leaders and political hopefuls from around the world.
Good afternoon, and welcome to another edition of Popcorn and Politics. I'm your host, Audrey Bell Kearney, along with my co-host, Derek J. Wilson, and a political candidate and hopeful today, Mr. Wade Herring. Thank you so much for joining me, fellas.
Thank you.
Very welcome, very welcome. So we got a good show for you today. You know, our election season is creeping up on us. Time does not wait, so we'll be right into the primaries real soon. So as we move forward, we're going to keep bringing you great candidates to share their platform with you and why you should vote for them. And I'm happy to have Mr. Herring here with us today. But before we get into that, I know Derek got some things he wants to say about the whole January 6th. We just had I call it National Insurrection Day. I know I'm just being politically not correct, but that's what I see it as, National Insurrection Day. You know, every day on my show, Good Morning Gwinnett, I announce a national holiday. So that's when I added to the calendar, National Insurrection Day.
Day.
Yeah, I know, right?
Yeah, it's definitely disappointing that we had to witness that last year, especially a day after that. We just especially here in Georgia, where we just elected our first ever black U.S. senator, and then John Ossoff won. And then the next day you have an insurrection where they just go destroy the Capitol. And it was definitely heartbreaking. But not yesterday, January 6th marked the 1 year anniversary where the insurrection happened. Trump still refuses to accept any form of responsibility for his involvement or inciting of that insurrection. President Biden called him out in a speech to mark the anniversary, but it was a somber day. We did lose. I want to say at least I know one police officer was killed, and several others was injured. It was just a sad day, and a day to remember, a day to know what can happen when you allow democracy to falter like it almost did. And so I'm grateful, and might be the only time that you will ever hear me say these words, but I'm grateful that that Governor Kemp and Secretary of State stood up to President Trump and didn't allow him to I don't want to say steal the election, but didn't allow him to have the results change. So I'm grateful for them for at least having the integrity to do that much.
The
But
decency, yeah.
yeah.
Because so many people back down, and what's crazy for me, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around that. It's almost like he has like a folder with everybody's name in it, and it's saying if you say something, I'm gonna pull this folder out on you. That's what I feel like I was in a bad version of Scandal, right? And
Yeah.
B613 had everybody's folder waiting to pull it out. That's how I felt. So y'all know I was deep into Scandal. If y'all remember B613, you also watch Scandal.
No, I never got into Scandal. I always watch, semi-real political shows, West Wing,
But
House
trust me,
of
if you had
Cards.
watched that, it felt like a episode on Scandal, whole last 2020. So but anyway, that's neither
Yeah.
here nor there. Here nor there. We got our own scandals right here in America most of the time. But anyway, so listen, we have a great guest here today. He is running for the Congressional District 1011 in Georgia, and that's the Savannah area. Wade, welcome to the show. What areas does the Congressional District 1 cover?
So thank you for having me here. Yes, I'm running for Congress for the 1st District of Georgia. It's 15 counties from the South Carolina line all the way down to the Florida line. Some names that your listeners in the Atlanta area will know are Savannah, of course, Chatham County, Brunswick, that's Glenn County, St. Mary's, Camden County, Hinesville, Liberty County. But it's 15 counties. It encompasses the entire coast. So all of the barrier islands, the Altamaha River Basin, the Savannah River, and of course the port, 3 military bases. So it's a very, very important district. for our state, but also for our nation.
Now, is does that include Dougherty County? Is that outside of the district, Dougherty County, Albany, Georgia?
No, Albany is too far west, so it does not include Albany.
Okay.
Um, it would include Waycross. It would include Baxley.
Hmm.
Baxley is Appling County. That's about as far west as we get.
Okay. Okay.
Okay.
So you decided to run. What made you decide to take on this challenge? Because I give applause to most people who get into politics. Because I thought about dabbling myself way, and I didn't think I was ready just yet. Derek, he has done it a couple of times, and I've been kind of right alongside him, and I said to myself, I don't know if I'm cut out for that. What made you decide to take this leap?
January 6th is what made me decide to take this leap. So,
Wow.
uh, January 1st of last year, I was in my 36th year of law practice. I've typically worked with smaller to medium sized businesses, helping them not only follow the law, but also to do the right thing. The past year and a half, that's been dealing with the problems of COVID primarily, and also of issues of racial justice as we confronted those in our society, but also in our workplace. And then came January the 6th. And as Derek was saying, and as you were saying, it was hard to believe that that was happening in our country. It was shocking. It was disappointing. It made me sad. It made me angry. I left work early that day. I couldn't stay focused on my work, and my wife and I sat on the couch at home watching the television set, wondering what was going to happen next in our country. I saw those brave young women interns secure the electoral box where the votes were. I saw them get that box to safety. But then I saw six representatives from the state of Georgia, including the incumbent for the first district, Buddy Carter, stand up to overturn the election after after we'd had that riot in the Capitol. And
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
I decided then that could not stand. It was a fundamental violation of their oath of office, and that I was going to have to do something and get off the sidelines for our country. And that's why I'm running.
Wow.
So there were a lot of people who took an oath for this country that seems to have forgotten that oath. They seem to have forgotten that they stood up, raised their hand, and vowed that we were one nation under God. What do you say about that? Because it's crazy when we look back and we look forward to see that there are just a lot of people who don't take the oath seriously, and they kind of bend it to make it do what they want it to do.
Well, an oath to me is a sacred thing. Um, as a lawyer and as a man of faith, an oath means something, and they all took an oath to defend the Constitution. And when they acted to overturn the election last January 6th, they violated that oath. They put personal ambition before country, they put politics before the people, they put power before what is right. And that cannot stand. We cannot let that happen again. And as we get more information about last January the 6th, it seems more and more clear that it was planned, it was coordinated, and my concern it's a dress rehearsal for 2024.
Yeah.
And we're in a moment of urgency. Um, this we're at a crossroads in the life of our nation where good people have got to come forward and say enough's enough. And I'm encouraged by the reaction that I've received thus far in my campaign, because obviously I'm not going to do this alone. I'm going to do this with the help of lots and lots of good Americans who say that cannot happen again.
Yeah. So, Mr. Heron, with all that's going on in Brunswick dealing with, the Arbery case, and I see your website says equal justice for all. As an African American, uh, what or how could you in Congress assist the federal government in pass one getting the voters' rights act passed. I know it's in the Senate right now, but like, what can be done in order to help us as African Americans feel safe and secure uh, in our country?
Well, first, we need to acknowledge the reality of the history of our country. Uh, our country is a country of great promise, but that promise too frequently has not been kept or has been broken, and that's especially true of our Black citizens. As tragic as the Arbery case was, it does give me some hope that the justice system works the way it's supposed to, and then those three men are going to be tried beginning next month in federal court for hate crimes. So we see our justice system working. In terms of what I can do as a congressional representative, one is acknowledge the history, two, listen and learn from our citizens who have not realized that promise of America, and then three, be a champion for keeping the promise of America. And that would include things like supporting the Voting Rights Act, the John Lewis bill. It's called different things, but once upon a time that was a bipartisan bill that was routinely renewed. The Supreme Court unfortunately took the teeth out of it uh, a few years ago. If anything, we've learned over the past year is that there is a role for the federal government to play in protecting voting rights. You mentioned Governor Kemp and Secretary of State Raffensperger, and yes, I commend them for what they did from November through January dealing with the Trump administration. But after that,
Yeah.
after that, they used uh, the big lie that there was something wrong with the election to pass the Senate bill in the General Assembly to fix a problem that isn't a problem, to make it harder for people to vote. And so, yes, we do need federal legislation on voting rights, and we need members of Congress from Georgia who are willing to stand up and say there's a role for the federal government here.
Why why do you think we have to keep renewing a act, and why isn't it something that's, at this point, it should be an amendment? Because like, why do we have to keep renewing our right to vote?
Well, again, unfortunately, the Supreme Court took away the enforcement mechanism through the Department of Justice.
Yeah.
So Congress has to respond to that Supreme Court opinion, to uh, to respond to that Supreme Court concern, to fix the legislation. Um, Again, sadly, I think the opposition to voting rights is not about the people. It's not about the Constitution. It's about power, and it's about politics not doing the right thing. But when you take away one group's right to vote, when you make it harder for one group of people to vote, that impacts all of us. My mother, blessedly, is still alive. But she can't stand in a long line. She doesn't have access to a copy machine. So the
Yeah.
requirement that she send in a copy of her ID with her absentee ballot, they've made it harder for my mother to vote, and that's wrong. That shouldn't be. So when you make it hard for one group of people to vote, you impact all Americans' right to vote, and we all need to stand up and say that's wrong. Let's fix this.
And I do remember at one point, I don't know if it was in Georgia, but I do know remember at one point a state was requiring uh, your birth certificate if you weren't able to provide, your ID. And so that's not an issue for people who was born in hospitals, but as people who could possibly be 65 and older, African Americans, they were born in houses with midwives, or the record keeping was horrible. Because if anybody ever tried to get on ancestry.com and find their history, the record keeping was horrible for African Americans back in the early 1900s. Uh, that sounds so far away, but back in the 1940s and 20s, and so. Uh, those are measures in particularly put in place to make it totally different, difficult for minorities. And then I didn't even think about the elderly aspect of it. So thank you for bringing that to the forefront, because I mean that does make it different, whether you're black, white, or whatever. The elderly, it does make it difficult for them to vote when they are
Absolutely.
reliable on that mail-in ballot. You know, it's
So we
sad.
know that that's an issue. What are some solutions that we can? Because as I think about that, as you said that, part of me was saying, well, let's get portable copy machines and go around and make sure we can make a copy at the door. That's I'm thinking like outside of the box. What do you think some of the solutions would be to those who cannot get out and vote, for those who don't have access to a copy machine and all of the things that are being required for them to be able to cast the ballot?
Well, I think voter education is going to be more important than ever. I hear people from all walks of life and of all ages say, well, my vote doesn't matter. Again, one of the positive lessons of the last election, especially here in Georgia, is your vote makes a difference. Um, the President Biden carried the state by about 11,000 votes or so. The margins for Senator Warnock and Senator Ossoff were not as big as we would have liked them to be, but we in Georgia made history in 2020, and so your vote makes a difference. Voter education will be a big part of it, and that old-fashioned grassroots, the churches and the neighborhoods, getting people to the polls. That's as modern as we are with all our technology. Those old-fashioned approaches, I think, are going to be real important. But of course, the voters have got to be excited to say my vote makes a difference. And if my goodness, if we haven't learned that over the last 4 years, I don't know when we're going to learn it. Our votes make a difference.
I
Yes.
think we have. I think for a lot of us, we've seen what a vote can really do. I think that just going forward, we just have to be a little bit creative and making sure that the voters get to the ballots and they have access. Because I think about, for me, before my mom passed away, she couldn't get out and vote either. So I would take the ballot to the outside drop box, but if they put the boxes on the inside of the building and close the building, that's another issue. So we're gonna have to get creative and making sure people get to the ballots, even if we got to go around and pick up ballots. Like, hey, listen, we got to pick up at 12 o'clock. We're coming to get your ballot. So, making sure that your ballot is out there. Now, you are running for the district, which it's a very large district, 15 counties. That's a lot.
Yeah.
What are some of the issues that you've seen in that district that you want to make sure that you, if elected, you can go in there and do something about?
Well, we've already talked about voting rights, but that is number one. If you don't have the right to vote, then you don't have a voice, and the rest of it almost doesn't matter. So that's number one. Other issues, though, infrastructure, which thank goodness the Congress passed, but with the Port Authority being here, both in Savannah and in Brunswick, I-95 and I-16 here, uh, as well as state bridges and roads. All of that's important. Now, I want to make sure that Georgia and the first district gets its fair share of that infrastructure money. And I want to make sure that local contractors have their fair share, and minority contractors have their fair share at participating in those contracts. Education, we've got to invest in education earlier, with child care and early childhood education. If we wait till that young person is in kindergarten, we've waited too late. We've got to start earlier. That's a family issue. That's an economic issue, though. Education is transformative, changes people's lives, gets them out of poverty. It's a national security issue. If we don't have an educated citizenry, we're not going to be able to meet the challenges that we confront in the world. Healthcare. All of us know the term underlying conditions now. And here in coastal Georgia, all of Georgia, but especially in coastal Georgia, that's hypertension, strokes, that's obesity, and that's diabetes. So we've got to educate people earlier in their lives and get them access to affordable health care early in their lives, so that they're healthier. And again, that's a family issue, it's a human rights issue, it's an economic issue. If you've lost a limb due to diabetes, you're not going to be in the workforce, and you're not going to be able to help your family. Um, and the other one that's important, especially here on the coast, is environment. Let's admit the reality of climate change. We've seen more serious hurricanes hitting our coast. The first weekend of November of last year, every coastal causeway in the district basically was flooded over. That,
Wow.
that didn't used to happen. We've got to get ready for what's coming already, and we've got to mitigate to the extent we can against future harm in the environment. And we've got to protect this special way of life that we have here on the coast, which is why people want to live on the coast and why people want to visit the coast. So voting, healthcare, infrastructure, education, and our environment. There would be other issues, but those would be my top issues and my top priorities.
I just want to
So
ask you a question about the infrastructure as it pertains to minorities. A lot of times when minorities go for government contracts, there's always a lot of red tape for them. Are you planning on putting parameters in place that will allow them to be able to have access to those resources easily, or at least the training on how to get them? Because I know for many of us small business owners who are minorities, that's always a hurdle, huge hurdles for us to jump over. And so, and I know that the resources are out there, but they're not always readily available for us to, to get that information.
right.
Right. No, and that's the one reason I mentioned it, because I recognize that shortfall. So I think you think about what a congressional representative is. That's the senior person in the legislature, anyway, for that district. So that person should be an advocate for the people and the businesses of that district, and should make sure that they get the information that they need. So yes, I would want to make sure that all businesses, but especially our minority businesses and our local businesses, uh, get that information that they need and have access to put in that bid.
Okay. Now, as far as healthcare, as you know, within the last week or two, uh, the Biden administration rightfully rejected the Kemp requirement that people had to have employment in order to receive the Medicaid, the work requirement. Uh, I do know that currently, right now, the Congress is trying to find a federal workaround the states that refuse to expand Medicaid in the area. As we know, Georgia is one of the highest states, uh, highest amongst a whole lot of bad things, the highest of the most uninsured in the country. You know, Georgia is one of those states, the highest of COVID related deaths. Georgia is one of those states. Georgia has closed in the top percentage of the most rural hospitals. Uh, and so, how is the federal government, how do you see the federal government stepping in and helping the to stop to stop those, to turn the tide into becoming one of the most insured states, one of the, we can't go back on COVID, but to make it so now that you know we have things in place and help this fundings for the hospitals, if the state is continuing to refuse for political reasons, continue to refuse to you know do things, accept the federal funding and accept programs because they're coming from a Democrat.
Right. Well, and I'm glad you brought that up. I share your concern about why Georgia is one of 12 states that has refused to expand Medicaid. I know that's been a priority for Senators Warnock and Ossoff to use federal legislation to require Georgia to expand it. I agree with you that the Biden administration rightfully rejected the Kemp proposal, which supposedly expanded Medicaid, but tied to work. Again, the pandemic has taught us many lessons. If your insurance, your health insurance system cannot be tied exclusively to work, March of 2020, when the pandemic shut us all down, hundreds of thousands of people lost their jobs and lost their health insurance. Um,
Yep.
so to require an expansion tied to work after that experience simply doesn't make any sense at all. Now, on the good news, now that the Republicans have not been able to kill the Affordable Care Act, the Affordable Care Act is working better. The options available on the exchanges in Georgia have expanded. The cost in Georgia has decreased, and the number of Georgians signing up on the exchange is third only to Florida and Texas. Interesting, it's those three states where people are signing up the most for the Affordable Care Act. But to your point, of course, the Affordable Care Act doesn't address those people either who don't have a job or who still can't afford the
Right.
insurance that's available on the exchange. That's why that expansion of Medicaid is so important.
Yeah.
Now you
All right.
mentioned education, pre-K kindergarten, things like that. There are a lot of parents out there right now who would love to have, be able to send their kids to pre-K, but they can't. So do you see yourself getting a lot of pushback when it's time to move kindergarten to that forefront? Because we've heard people say they don't need it, it's too early, keep them in daycare. We've heard that said. My daughter, I have a granddaughter who's about to be 3 years old, and my daughter would love to send her to pre-K, but not she can't do it.
Right. Now, no,
Well,
again, I think this is a common sense issue and it's a family issue. Um, I've got my first grandchild. He was born December 30.
congratulations.
But thank you. But one of the hardest things to be is a young parent with young children. That's hard. And
Yeah.
a lot of young people in our nation are saying, you know what? That's not for me. That's too hard. That's too expensive. I don't live near mom and daddy and grandmama. I've got to do this on my own. We've got a declining birth rate in the United States.
Wow.
Again, it's not just a family issue, it's a national security issue. It's an economic issue. We need to make it easier for young people to want to have a family and then to have a quality way of life for their children. That means childcare and that means good quality early childhood education. So I've heard the pushback too. Um, I just, my response to that is, well, let's be family friendly. Let's look after our little kids. That's just good sense for all of us.
And
It's so
also, we all. Oh, I apologize. Oh,
I just want to say it real quick. So funny you say that because my daughter has one and she's already said she's not having any more. I'm done. And I was like, you gotta have
yeah.
like one more. She's like, I'm done. So that seems to be the consentment, like like they it's too much. And she says it all the time. It's too much. And I was like, well, there's nothing I can say. She's a grown woman, but that's true. That's what they're saying.
Yeah.
And also from a back to connect this to equal justice, equity justice. We all heard about the school to prison pipeline, and And so one of the statistics that I received when I was running for county commissioner in Gwinnett County is that one, uh, 62%, 52% of the students, now this is just strictly to Gwinnett County, 62% of entering kindergartners were below grade level, reading level, when they entered kindergarten. By third grade, uh, that number was roughly around 45% of those students were still below the reading level. And we all know third grade, and the reason why third grade is relevant because that's the when they start doing the standardized testing, and the standardized testing has been linked directly to the school to prison pipeline. That's how they determine how, when to build another prison and how many beds that's required in that system. And when 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 brought to the forefront in Gwinnett County at that time, the superintendent, his comments was, the parents are the first teachers and parents, and which is true. But like you said, if I'm working 2 or 3 jobs trying to provide a roof and some food, it'll be beneficial for the parents to be able to have their child not just in a daycare, but in a early childhood facility where the child is actually being taught. And I want to say it tied to is definitely tied to, in my opinion, low income and minorities, because and I say in minorities because, as we know, a large number of minorities are it falls in that bracket. But if you so happen to be a minority that's not in the low income, you can afford to send your child to a private school where they're learning at 2 and 3 and 4 years old before they get into public school. And so, my question is, how can the federal, because the federal government provides that through the Department of Health and Human Services. They provide the grants for uh, uh, early childhood education. And so my question is, how could uh, you, as a congressional person, the highest legislator in your district, how could you convince areas in your district that early childhood is needed, and there's funds available for that early childhood and pre-K, to be honest?
Well, I think anybody who's awake and paying attention knows that we've got a crisis in early childhood education. I have represented some child care centers over the years. The people who are in that business, and it is a business, but they're not making any money at it. It's a calling.
Yeah.
It's a calling for them to take care of those young children. The workers in childcare make very, very low hourly salaries for the most part. And then COVID has made all of that
Yeah.
worse. So if you're a parent, if you're a grandparent, if you got a niece or nephew, you know firsthand that childhood education and childcare in this country, we're at a crisis, and that we've got to fix it. You mentioned third grade. My wife is a former school teacher. If that child isn't on track by third grade, it is really, really hard, not impossible, but really, really hard to get that child back on track. And you're right. Policymakers look at those third grade stats, not just for things like prisons, but also where are we going to put a new business? So
Yeah.
one more time, it's a family issue, but it's also an economic issue, and it's just a common sense and decency issue. We've got to make it easier for our young families uh, to have those children and raise those children the right way.
That's scary though. Third grade.
Third grade.
That's
That is
scary.
very
Third
scary.
grade.
Like, not only that, based on the education of a third grader determines whether or not a business comes into an area. That sounds crazy, but I guess
Yeah,
that's how it is.
Yeah.
yeah, that's
Well,
sad.
that would, when someone says it's too early, to think about pre-K, or it's too early to think about quality childcare. Um, that would be part of my response is let's do the right thing. Come on, folks. But part of it is okay. Let's look at the facts. Let's look at the data. And those first years are real important. And Derek, as you said, if mother and daddy are working two or three jobs and they haven't had the opportunity to interact with that child the way they would like to have, then when that child starts off at kindergarten or first grade, they're already behind the curve. Not through the fault
Or
of mother and daddy. Mother and daddy just
right.
trying to keep a roof over their head and food on the table.
Or if mom and dad didn't get the proper education,
Right.
Mm-hmm.
you know. A lot of us, well, like in my gen, I guess millennials, as we can say, a lot of us was unfortunately was probably raised by grandma, or a lot of people, period, are raised by grandma. My grandma had a sixth grade education. She was wise as all outdoors, but again, she had a sixth grade education. Fortunately enough, majority of her kids end up with college degrees. And then so I had, but you know, it takes it takes it takes the my grandma who with a sixth grade education, she was smart enough to know that her kids needed an education. And so, but the opportunity was there. She was able to send her kids to the different schools, early childhood education, and this and like that. And so, it's definitely needed. The parents are the first teacher, but also if the parent has any type of education, learning disability, all that's doing is continuing the cycle, you know, which we need to break.
Right.
So speaking of that, so a lot of parents work two jobs, three jobs, come home late, tired. Are there any after school programs in the area that can help alleviate some of that pressure so these kids will have somewhere to go until the parents come home, or they can go somewhere and get their homework so when they do go home, eat and go to bed because both parents and the child are probably tired by then. Are there after schools programs that are available? And if there aren't, are there plans to get some?
Uh, Again, I think from the federal government's perspective, that's primarily an issue of funding to make
Mm-hmm.
sure that our school systems have that funding to provide that after school care and that they're able to uh, act upon that reality of how hard it is now to be a young family.
Are there additional federal fundings available to ensure that the schools are COVID safe?
Yes, there has been, and Derek, the honest answer is I'm not familiar with the details of that, but I do know that there's been a lot of federal money put into uh, the school systems,
Yeah.
and that a lot of that money has gone to COVID protocols. One reason the economy overall is doing so well is because of the bill that the Biden administration passed back in January. No Republican voted for it. But Georgia has been the beneficiary of that. It'll be interesting to see how the Kemp administration
Yeah.
uh, handles that largesse. Uh, but both on the government side and on the private sector side, uh, we're doing as well as we are, and the economy is strong. Don't let the narrative that the economy is in trouble, that's a false narrative. But one reason the economy is doing as well as it has is because of the Rescue Act that passed last January.
So as you
Speaking of,
enter into, oh, sorry,
go ahead, go ahead, go
as
ahead.
you enter into, because we're speaking it, as you enter into office next January, how would you approach that, knowing that uh, at this in this day and age, reaching across the aisle is virtually almost impossible because the other side is refusing to work with each other. So how would you approach that, and how are your plans, or how do you plan to get your ideas into laws or into initiatives that will become successful?
Well, I recognize that the partisan divide is large. Um, I'm a believer in trying to find common solutions. When the other side, though, uh, turns its back on you and walks away, that's a pretty tough situation to work with. I would say this, Derek, it starts one step at a time. And I know maybe that sounds naive and cliche, but one reason I'm running is because we know where we are right now is not working.
Right.
We all feel that. And I don't care if you're Republican, Democrat, not political at all. We all can feel in our bones that where we are right now is not working and that we're in trouble. Now, they say the definition of insanity is to keep doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. Let's stop. Let's stop doing the same thing over and over again. Let's try something different. Everybody talks about now that I've entered this, I am a politician. I acknowledge that. But I'm not a career politician.
Right.
I've already had a career. Um, you know, everyone talks about how bad career politicians are for our system. Okay, let's quit electing career politicians. The incumbent in my district is a career politician. Let's send him home and let's try something different. Let's try someone who's a demonstrated problem solver, someone who's a demonstrated listener, someone who's willing to compromise. I've been married for 39 years. I am willing to compromise.
Know a little bit about compromising.
Yeah. So, but
Anybody who's married for a period of time.
Time,
yeah.
yeah.
So, but Derek, you're right. We're in a bad place, and the other side makes it really hard uh, because their idea of compromise is to turn around and walk away, and that's
All right.
that's tough. But let's give it a try.
So
So wait,
one follow up on that. Sorry, one
Okay.
follow up. So, like you said, the cycle. So every time the Republicans are in charge, Democrats negotiate. Democrats compromise. And every time the Democrats get in charge, Republicans is like, nope, not interested, and walk away. The question is, like you say, we as Democrats continue, you know, doing the same thing and expect something different. And so my question is, of course, obviously we can't stoop to that level, but like for someone like me and other voters who get upset when when we see Democrats not bending, but they're willing to compromise. Perfect example. Democrats voted for the CARES Act. No Republican voted for the American Rescue Act. And it's like, how what can Democrats do to not influence but to convince Republicans that party is not first. Is country first. Like how can we get back to that? As much as I did not like Bob Dole and John McCain, I can honestly say I'd rather we go back to those Republicans than what we have now. It's just horrible because at least they was willing to have some type of common sense at some point and compromise and come to the table. So just that's my little soapbox. Sorry.
Well, I think the real effort has got to be with the American people.
Yeah.
Um, I think for the political Republican in office, and I don't want to say 100%, but for a lot of them, it's become about staying in power
Yeah.
before the people, before the country. So I think what Democrats have got to do is to appeal to the American people. We can do a better job with our messaging. And then again, I think most Americans of all walks of life recognize and understand we're not in a good place right now. And so if that's the way you feel, you got to go vote. You got to
Yeah.
show up on election day and you got to vote. And you got to vote for somebody who's willing to say, this can't continue. We've got to make a change.
All right. And stop voting against
I,
your what's the word we look Audrey, we talk about it all the time when people vote
I was just
against.
about to talk about it.
Yeah.
I was just about
Okay.
to talk about that was what I was trying to talk about because here's my thing. If you know that Biden's bill has put you giving you the things you need for your family, right? Why would you go and vote against that because you want to vote along party lines? And I think that's where the education is going to come in at. We got to let people know if you don't vote for this party or this person, that's going to be taken away from you. Yes, you got that because of this president. And if you don't vote the way you're supposed to vote, you won't have it. Or chances are you could lose it. So I think that's where the educational piece come in at because a lot of times I think people just vote along party lines, not
Yeah.
understanding that the Obama Act was really the CARES Act, right? But because they all they heard was Obama, they missed the fact that it was the Affordable Care Act. So I think the more education that they get on that, that helps those who are fighting for them, like really, really fighting for them, get their message out there and say, listen, this is what you have right now. And if you go this way, this is what you won't have. And I think that's going to be
Yeah.
important to all across the board for all of the candidates who are running for office.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and the thing that I would add to that is, as we talk to the voters and as we talk to our friends and as we talk to our neighbors, let's stop making decisions based on fear. Let's stop
Mm-hmm.
making decisions based on anger. Let's make decisions that are based upon what's good for our neighbors and our families and the people we see in the grocery store and the people we see at church. Let's make decisions based on those things. And when certain politicians and certain pundits try to distract us with these divisive terms that don't have any substance, with
Yeah.
these divisive claims that don't have any facts, let's take a deep breath and say, what's going to be best for America? Um, that we're in a funny place where people say the way to make America better is to make America angry and divided and looking backward. That's not the promise of America. The promise of America is for a better tomorrow. The promise of America is that together we can make a more perfect union.
Yeah.
That's the promise of America. The promise of America is that we can reinvent ourselves. That's when America. That's when America is great. The promise of America is when all of us have a seat at the table. That's when America is great, and that's what we've got to remind ourselves of, and remind our neighbors and our friends. Let's not give into that fear and anger. Let's give into the hope and the hard work that has always been part of the American dream.
Yeah.
Well, that was a good note to end it on. So thank you so much. How can people reach out to you to support the campaign and to support you as a candidate?
Thank you. We've got a website. It's wadeherringforcongress.com. We tried to make that easy. We've got our positions posted. And of course, if you want to donate, we'll accept that. And tell your friends, tell your family, whether you're in the district or not, let people know that someone's trying to make a change.
So
Yeah.
Wade Herring for Congress.
Wade
.com.
Herring for Congress, HERRING.
.com. All right, I'm going to put this up on the screen. So anybody who wants to support the campaign and make sure vote, they know who to vote for. This is who you vote for. This is where you go. Wade, thank you so much for being our guest today. We appreciate you taking the time to share your platform with us and your vision for the area that you're planning to serve. So thank you for that. And thank you to your
Thank
team for
you.
making sure we got this interview set up. I got on to do a mic check yesterday, so that was pretty cool. So tell your team we
Yeah.
said thank you as well.
Thank you. Thank you both. And thank you for having me.
You're
Greatly
very welcome.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. So listen, guys, that's all we got. Another political hope for here today on good. I was about to say good morning. With that popcorn and politics, that's too many podcasts I do, y'all. Popcorn and politics. We'll be back again next Sunday with another great guest. Remember, we got guests booked all the way up until March 1st. So don't be sure to tune in next Sunday, same time, same bat place. We'll be back again with another political hope. Thank you again, Wade. Thank you, Derek, for being my co-host, and I will see you on the other side. Have a good one, Wade.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're
Y'all
welcome.
take care.
You've been listening to Popcorn in Politics. What's the real deal? Hosted by Audrey Bell Kearney and Derek J. Wilson. Be sure to subscribe to the show and share it with your family and friends. To support the show, visit us on the web at www.popcorninpolitics.com. Connect with us on Facebook at Progressive Popcorn and on Instagram at Popcorn Politics Podcast.